And we continue, of course, to reflect on the life and time of Dr. Pheko as well, right here on the show. As you know, since the news of his passing broke, we've seen tributes pour in from all fronts. And as you might have heard earlier on as well in the bulletin, President Cyril Ramaphosa has expressed his deep condolences at the passing of liberation struggle veteran and former Pan-Africanist Congress President, Dr. Ernest Motsoko Pheko. Now, he died on Friday night at the age of 93. We are now joined by former Deputy President of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, Mr. Themba Godi. Mr. Godi, thank you so much for your time. Before we get into this conversation, perhaps just give us your immediate reaction to the sad news of the passing of Dr. Pheko.
Thank you very much for having me. It is indeed very sad. Least expected, shock to hear about it. Of course, I knew that he had aged, but you know, having worked with the man for quite some times, it cuts deep. It's very, very sad. Very, very sad indeed.
Indeed, Mr. Godi, and as you've rightfully mentioned right now, you know, this is a man you served with for almost a decade, and this was also at a time when Pan-Africanism was frowned upon. What lessons have you learned from him?
I think one thing about Dr. Pheko is that he was a passionate man, very passionate about Pan-Africanism. And as you rightly point out, we stood for Pan-Africanism at a time when it was declared an anti-white philosophy and that wanted to drive white people into the sea, propounded not only by our oppressors, but also by some sections of the liberation movement. So it needed very strong people to stand and propagate Pan-Africanism the way we did, the way he did. But one thing for sure, when it comes to the land question, when it comes to African culture, when it comes to the teachings of Sobukwe, of Kwame Nkrumah, of Marcus Garvey, he was very, very upright. He was very firm. He was a writer, an avid reader. He read a lot and he wrote a lot.
And Mr. Godi, narrowing it back to some of your reflections right now, you described him as a very passionate man, a man that was passionate about justice, passionate about history and the land question, as well as passionate about Pan-Africanism as well. How would you like South Africans to remember him?
I think he should be remembered as a simple African. You know, he was a very simple man. A very simple African who was dedicated to the cause of Africa and who never deviated or compromised, even in hostile environments. Was a man who loved Africa, who loved Africa. He was quite outstanding, even in terms of our standards as Pan-Africanists. He stood out for his passion, his energy, for his love, for his commitment, for his education. I think that is what I would love African to remember him and to emulate his example.
And also, I know throughout your reflections, you've referred to him as well as a father figure. Talk to us about what kind of a man he was outside of politics.
You know, many people will be surprised to find that outside politics, he was a very simple man, of very simple taste. He enjoyed a good laughter, you know, he had a raucous laughter. And he would chat a lot. He would chat a lot, you know. And when we were with him, you wouldn't think that you are with an educated man, a man who has been to the United Nations, who have been in exile, who have been through prison. He retained the simplicity of the Mosotho man growing up in the rural areas of the Eastern Cape. He never had any else around him.
And his passing also comes at a time where we're just in the cusp of 30 years of democracy as a country, Mr. Godi. And some of the building blocks that were laid by him for some of the freedoms that we enjoy today. Talk to us about what would you say those that are left behind should be doing to keep his legacy alive?
Well, the one thing about Dr. Phekos was that he was tenacious, meaning that he was a man of convictions, not of convenience. He fought for freedom, and he continued to champion the cause of the African people, even beyond 1994. He remained true. He did not allow himself to be absorbed into the glitterings of the post-94 society. He never took his eyes off the prize, which was that African self-determination is the basis for which we can move forward, all of us as a country. And I would want to urge our people, African people, that let us remember that the national question is still to be resolved, which is the return of the land into the hands and into the control of the African people as the basis of defining our freedom and as the basis for our development materially, economically, as a people. And I think Dr. Phekos, more than many, have done a lot, especially in terms of writing. He wrote a lot. He had so many books. He wrote so many articles on the land question, on Africanism, on Pan-Africanism, which I believe it's a great source for future generations for purpose of reference.